For over 40 years, Harold Whitman was just a quiet man in a small Midwestern town. He had a stiff walk, a neat lawn, and a habit of watching the world from his porch, as if he wasn't quite part of it anymore. No one knew about the locked wooden chest in his bedroom. Inside, it held a story that history tried to bury, a story Harold had learned to keep to himself. In 1969, at just 20 years old, Harold was drafted. He'd never been far from home, never held anything more dangerous than a hunting rifle. Suddenly, he was shipped halfway around the world, into a war that felt confusing and endless. The jungle became his classroom. It taught him the smell of fear, the deafening sound of silence, and how a single moment of hesitation could cost a life. Harold was assigned to a small reconnaissance unit, the kind of team whose missions were whispered and whose names never made the papers. Their job wasn't glory, it was survival. One night, deep in enemy territory, they intercepted intel that changed everything. A nearby civilian village, already worn down by the war, was about to be caught in a massive crossfire. Hundreds of innocent men, women, and children would be trapped by morning. The official order was clear: stand down and observe. Harold never forgot the look on his squad leader's face. He slowly folded the message, then looked at his men, young soldiers carrying an impossible weight. "We can't let this happen," he said quietly. What they did next was never written in any official report. Acting against direct orders, the unit moved. Under the cover of darkness, they warned the villagers, guiding families through treacherous jungle paths to safety. They held defensive positions through the night, buying precious time with every round they fired. By dawn, the village was empty. They had saved hundreds of lives, but they had disobeyed a direct command. Their heroism came at a price. Within weeks, the unit was quietly dissolved. The incident was officially buried, labeled a communication error. There were no commendations, no medals, no mention of it anywhere. It simply vanished from the record. When Harold returned home, there were no parades. The country was tired of the war and the men who fought it. People avoided the topic. So Harold learned that silence was safer. He built a new life, got married, raised a family, and worked at a factory for 30 years. He never spoke of the war. When his kids asked, he'd just say, "It was a long time ago." But at night, the jungle always returned in his dreams: the damp air, the whispered commands, and the faces of the people he saved. Years turned into decades. His wife passed away, his children moved on, and Harold faded into the background of his quiet town. Until one afternoon at the local library. A young college student, researching the war for a project, noticed Harold's quiet intensity. She saw the way his eyes lingered on an old photograph in a book. Bravely, she asked if he had served. Normally, Harold would have politely changed the subject. But something in her voice, genuine curiosity, not judgment, made him pause. For the first time in decades, he spoke. "Yes," he said. "I did." He told her everything. Not with anger or pride, but with simple, raw honesty. He talked about the fear, the impossible choices, and the lives they saved in the shadows. The student listened, recording every word. Weeks later, she returned, this time with a history professor. Unbeknownst to Harold, recently declassified documents had begun to surface, fragmented reports that hinted at a forgotten operation. Harold's story was the missing piece of the puzzle. The truth was undeniable. An investigation confirmed it all. The mission happened, the lives were saved, and the soldiers involved had been deliberately erased from history to avoid political fallout. On a crisp autumn morning, Harold was invited to a small ceremony at the local Veterans Hall. A folded flag was placed in his hands, and a long overdue citation was read aloud. The room stood in silence, not for the war, but for an act of courage that history had tried so hard to forget. There were no headlines or documentaries. Harold didn't want them. What mattered was simpler. The truth had finally been spoken. His story was no longer buried. And for the first time since he was a young man in the jungle, Harold Whitman slept through the night, knowing that what he and his brothers had done finally had its place in history. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, please give it a like and subscribe for more untold stories of courage.